Hey, what's up guys? Gons here for the Face Like the Sun YouTube channel. You know, the Trump presidency has been the reemergence of conservatism and the so-labeled right-wing response to a, quote, progressive 8 years of Obama. And I would argue that the only true progress that Obama made, and Bush Jr. before him, and Clinton before him, and Bush Sr. before him, was a progress towards a new world order. And Donald Trump has obviously been sold as the 180 response to this leftist liberal agenda, and in many ways he is. The mere fact that he spoke truths about the current situation in Washington was refreshing for millions of Americans who have been part of an underground movement to expose the corruption for years. And at the same time, these quote-unquote leftist Democratic minions haven't been able to really accept the fact that their political heroes were some of the most vile, corrupt, and quite literally satanic people around. And the division and chaos continues. And we have really become a split country, not because of anything real happening, but because literally everybody's brainwashed. And certain people are brainwashed in certain ways, other people are brainwashed in other ways. And that's why the only truth in this world is Jesus Christ and the gospel, because it has to be external to our own subjective ideas of what truth is. Jesus Christ, the gospel, that's the truth. That's what brings true deliverance. But with this new established conservatism, the return of the Republican Party with this new shine, comes with it a whole new set of issues that we really have to keep watch. And really the big thing here is that Bible prophecy in so many ways has gone mainstream. And what I mean by that is that the topic of Bible prophecy, specifically behind the pre-tribulation rapture doctrine, will be pushed out there even more, I think, in the coming months, years, and perhaps throughout the Trump presidency, because it's just a big topic that people talk about. Now, there are people on YouTube saying the rapture is going to happen before February 17th. And while there are interesting celestial things going on, if you want to take things from a exegetical biblical perspective, there's no chance that the rapture is going to happen before February. And even the concept of imminence is different from expectancy. And this goes into my position on the rapture, which is pre-wrath currently. And, you know, I'm open to change on that, but I'm definitely a pre-wrath rapture guy. And I definitely think the things that Alan Kirshner over at Eschatos Ministries, as well as Chris White and others have talked about with the connections in Scripture in terms of the overall timing of the rapture or when it's supposed to happen, how it relates to the day of the Lord. I agree with those studies. So check it out. I'll leave links in the description for some of those videos.
Pre-tribulationists teach that the rapture it's signless. It's unannounced. That is, there's no intervening events that must happen before the rapture. So if you have just one single prophetic intervening event that happens before the rapture, then you don't have an any moment rapture, and therefore you don't have imminence. So this is the holy grail of pre-tribulationism. If you take this away, their whole system collapses. This is their deepest presupposition in their system. And so I've always found it ironic, even contradictory, that it's pre-tribulational teachers. They're just absolutely fixated on talking about events, signs. It's almost schizophrenic, to be honest with you. You have Calvary Chapel pastors. Calvary Chapel seems to be putting on a Bible prophecy conference almost every weekend somewhere in this country, and they're always talking about, well, signs and events that are happening out there, and then in the same breath they'll say that the rapture is imminent. I mean, it's truly amazing to watch this. Jimmy DeYoung is a well-known pre-trib teacher. He's having a Bible prophecy conference, and the name of the conference, or the theme of the conference, is how do current events fit into Bible prophecy? I kid you not. And yet these are the guys who, again, in the same breath, will say, well, the rapture is imminent. No signs have to happen before the rapture. Go figure. Hey, you figure it out. The contradictory nature somehow escapes them. So anyway, I just wanted to point out that that irony and schizophrenic contradiction, to be quite frank.
But I've noticed this onslaught of biblical prophecy topics being pushed out into mainstream outlets. Now, the Christian Post, which is one of the spammiest websites ever, says, is Donald Trump the last Trump before Jesus Christ returns? And to be fair, this actually interviewed Dr. Samuel Lamerson, who is a professor of New Testament and president of Florida's Knox Theological Seminary, and he said that the whole notion that, Donald Trump is the last Trump is ridiculous, and he said it's the kind of thing you tell your students to stay away from, this kind of exegetical fallacy. And in many ways, to suggest that the name Trump has something to do with the last Trump is quite sensational, and while there may be shadows of certain things there, that there's a man named Trump who takes on the American presidency and is bringing conservatism back, really appealing to the evangelical community in America and all this stuff. It is very strange, to say the least, but that doesn't mean that there's actual significance. And as this professor points out, this whole thing with the Trump and the last Trump idea only works in the English language. But you might be thinking, yeah, Christian Post talking about Donald Trump and, is he the last Trump? That's not too surprising. And you're right, that's not. But I'm starting to see more rapture talk and just Bible prophecy talk in other outlets. dailymail.co.uk, which is known for, more of the sensational kinds of stuff. The Rapture Index that predicts Earth's end of times, and according to its creator, we are heading into the eye of the hurricane. And this article interviews Todd Strandberg of the Rapture Index, and he's made kind of a Dow Jones or sort of a market thing of Bible prophecy events that are supposed to happen, and he's saying that these events worldwide are completely unrelated except for with Bible prophecy. And you look at the list, and for sure, yeah, there's some interesting things going on. And I'm not even questioning the man's faith, I'm just saying Bible prophecy topics going a little more mainstream. Here's another article by metro.co.uk. Christians think the rapture is coming and the signs are already here. And this is pretty much a shadow article from dailymail.co.uk, but another outlet that's using this topic. And there are stories like this out there. This was published on GhanaWeb.com on Sunday, January 29th, 2017. Ghanaian journalist gets scary dream about the rapture. And he says that in the dream it was dark and the world was in a timeless space. And he saw a gaping hole in the sky. And people were running helter-skelter, and that it was horrible and scary, but he knew that it was a dream about the rapture. And a lot of people have had interesting dreams about certain events that might take place. I've personally had them that I can talk about in another video. But he ends this whole thing with, let's strengthen our personal walk with God, and that I have to agree with. But again, interesting that this kind of thing is out there. The Gleaner, which is a Jamaican news outlet, the rapture, figment of the imagination or something coming. And it goes through and, does a pretty good job of outlining some of the aspects of the rapture. And I think the person they interviewed was a pastor, Ethan Johnson of Mission of Mercy. And, some of the things that was said was pretty good. But again, rapture talk in the news. And then here on BroadwayWorld.com, Glenda Dumas releases Visions of the Rapture and Unseen Realm. And this is allegedly a book here that was written by Glenda Dumas. And she basically outlines her vision of the rapture and the unseen world. And what did Jesus tell us? That there are going to be lots of false Christs and false prophets. It's just very interesting that more of this sort of prophetic talk is hitting the mainstream. And here's where it gets really interesting. Salon.com, meet Mike Pompeo, the far-right Christian zealot with Islamophobe ties who will lead Trump's CIA. Obviously, Republican Mike Pompeo is the new head of CIA. Republican Mike Pompeo is a rapture-believing evangelical who sees radical Islam at work in small-town America. And of course, this is kind of a hit piece on the Trump campaign. It always is when it comes with these outlets. But you have this quote from Mike Pompeo, that it's going to be chaos basically until the rapture happens. And I don't know exactly where he stands on the rapture in terms of timing or position or doctrine. But, it's interesting that he would say that, once again, sort of circling the wagons of the evangelicals or Christians who believe in quote-unquote Bible prophecy in terms of a pre-trib rapture. But I think what's going to happen and has happened is that the fact that we have someone like this with these views in government is both a blessing and a curse. And this is why I wanted to make this video, because I don't think it's a clear black and white issue. And if you go through Mike Pompeo's Wikipedia page, obviously you can't nail down everything on Wikipedia, but there is a good list of his political positions. And for the most part, I'm in line with his political stance on things. The only thing I am against is his stance on national security. He basically thinks that Edward Snowden should be put on the death penalty. And it says here, he has advocated for rolling back post-Snowden surveillance reforms, saying, quote, Congress should pass a law reestablishing collection of all metadata and combining it with publicly available financial and lifestyle information into a comprehensive, searchable database. Legal and bureaucratic impediments to surveillance should be removed. That includes Presidential Policy Directive 28, which bestows privacy rights on foreigners and imposes burdensome requirements to justify data collection. And of course, he opposes the closing of Guantanamo Bay. He's pretty harsh militarily or whatever. So those are areas that I can't really get behind. The narrative of the liberal leftists, whatever, they're going to jump on that. Trump's pick for CIA Mike Pompeo sees foreign policy as a vehicle for holy war. This whole idea of a holy war that Dr. Future has been talking about and writing about for years now. It seems like there's a great setup for this. And then, of course, if you go to the democraticunderground.com, which I didn't even know existed, the Democratic Underground, they have a thread called CIA Pick Mike Pompeo is a religious freak who might bring on the rapture. Obviously, republishing this Slate article and sort of slandering Mike Pompeo, not even fully understanding the whole paradigm, as a religious freak who might bring on the rapture. Mike Pompeo never said that he's going to bring the rapture upon the world or whatever. So, obviously mischaracterization there, but that's going to happen with the other side, left aisle, whatever. But the point here is that by creating that tension with the other side on this topic of the rapture or just evangelical, whatever, it's going to cause the evangelical community to back this guy, Pompeo, and by default back his doctrine, which, again, I don't know that he's stated exactly what rapture position he has, but it doesn't really matter. The majority of Christians who hear that will probably assume a pre-tribulation rapture, which is that popular view, which, again, if you're a pre-trib rapture guy, great. I don't have a problem with you. There's no salvation issue. We are one with the Lord, and we should rejoice in that. However, the Christians, the evangelicals at large who are given this eminence doctrine, this pre-trib doctrine that, we're out of here before anything bad happens, it's just a complete setup for a deep deception of the elect, just like Jesus said, if it's possible, And for many of us who have been in this sort of space of looking at Bible prophecy responsibly, grounded, but also understanding or trying to understand all the world events going on and how it might relate to the bigger picture of God's cosmic timeline, his prophetic timeline. He's ultimately in control here. But those of us who have kind of been keeping a finger on the pulse of things, it's going to be harder to deceive us. And ultimately, the deception that's coming is for the church. It's not necessarily for the people. If you want to make this a political argument, if I can use the political argument or landscape as an example, the people who are staunchly Hillary supporters, Democrats, if you want to call it that, liberals, those who identify as social justice warriors, that whole group of people, okay, in many ways, Satan doesn't have to do any more to deceive them. They are already in the grips of the deception, which is really sad, but that's why it's even more important for us to really try to wake people up to what's really happening. And it's difficult to do when there are social movements behind a lot of these backlashes that we're seeing here that are unfounded, really, if you dig down to the nitty-gritty, or are completely illogical. Remember, they're supporting people who are in favor of pedophilia and satanic rituals and things like that, right? They're supporting these people. So again, Satan doesn't have to do much to deceive them, but Jesus says the elect might be deceived if it were possible. That means that the deception is headed straight to the church, and that's why I'm raising warning signs here, not in fear, but just in a sense of, hey, our alertness, our vigilance, and our duty as watchmen, it's really game on now. We really have to keep an eye out for what's happening. We really have to try to inform the church. And the discussion is, how do we do that? Well, at a really practical level, educate yourself biblically, scripturally, but also, with an awareness of what's happening. and then, you know, have the conversations with family, friends, and, you know, within your coworkers, stuff like that. I know it's difficult because these topics are crazy, but now is a really good time because everything is so polarized and a lot of these issues are in the mainstream. But if you're not educated on it, what's going to end up happening is you're going to parrot what the news outlets say or what the mainstream says or what the famous preacher says about it or whatever. And that's something that we have to get away from. We have to be responsible for our own intellect and in our minds, right? Renewing of the mind. When God renews your mind, right? This thing happens where it's like, okay, I don't trust mainstream outlets. I want to know the truth from the word and, you know, discuss those things. So what do you guys think? Mike Pompeo, blessing or a curse? I'd say a little bit of both. What do you guys think? Have an awesome day, guys. God bless.